And we are back on Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now, as always, is Steve Balestrieri in the Secret Square, and Derek Havens with a little bit of a smile in the right-hand square. In today's show, I'm going to ask the question because it's been a pretty, let's just say, interesting, volatile week for the Patriots. Are the Patriots heading in the right or wrong direction? And of course, I spelled direction wrong, so that starts us off with a Goldman to start the show. So let's not waste any time, guys. And also, please do subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Mr. Balestrieri, I'll go to you. Opening thoughts on a volatile week for the Patriots.
Yeah, you always look forward to going to joint practices, as what happened this week. We've been there several times, seen the Saints a couple of times, seen the Eagles, the Bears. I can't even remember how many. We've gone to several down there at Gillette, and you always look forward to it because you get to see the players, going against another team, so you get a better feel for how they're doing. But I thought this week both sessions were marred by ugly brawls that were basically stupid. And, you hate to see that. That's how people get hurt. In fact, a woman did get hurt, one of the fans, and I thought that was awful.
The Crafts are so lucky. So lucky she wasn't hurt worse. I mean, just that lawsuit would have been so easy. It was like, Jesus. I mean, you can always tell that, or you can tell that this was, a shit show because Mike Reese was pissed off. And we've met Mike Reese several times, every single one of us. How many times has Mike Reese ever been pissed off? You can easily see how
he was perturbed.
He was annoyed. You can tell because he does his daily recap videos, and he was, I would say, audibly.
He said he never saw this before. Never
seen it in 2 decades. We've been down there a lot, not 20 years worth.
Yep.
Never. I mean, I can't think of a better, I guess, third party to kind of give us a little perspective than Mike Reese, who is one of the, best, obviously one of the best reporters on the beat in the country, but for this team specifically. And wow, just like Steve said, just totally unproductive in some circumstances. And I get that if you are a coach, why training camp, joint practices could be more beneficial to games because everything's so controlled. To me, I think the Panthers seemed, based off reports, were the instigators, but I think the Patriots were complicit as well. And when you have so many, I guess back and forths, I just think it's frustrating because it's like, you aren't really probably working on what you need to be.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, to just recap on that, I was trying to think back to all the joint practices we saw. We've never seen anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not like that.
We've seen individual dust-ups, which, can happen. That's, individual ones are one thing, but when, both teams just get into a melee.
And it continues over 2 days. That's the part that blows me away.
And I was trying to think about, that exact same thing. And I remember the three of us were there and the Patriots had 2 brawls amongst each other. If you remember that, it was just the offense and defense the same day. And then Belichick had all the coaches leave the field and the captains all got together and finished practice on their own with no problems. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that, Steve.
I do as well.
But, this to me, and again, I wasn't there. None of us were there, but this sounds a little bit different. And I'm not sure what to make of this, Derek, because, again, the talk here is this a positive? Is this a negative?
No, it's absolutely a negative. No, it's absolutely negative. I mean, I don't think it really has much. I don't know how to phrase this. I don't really think it carries much weight as far as like the team for the year goes. I just meant
I don't think it has much to do with it at all.
I just think it was just a shitty week. Yeah, it is a bad look. I mean, like I said, it seems like based on reports, the Panthers were overly aggressive, and then probably we're doing a little jawing and a little chippy. See, here's the thing people need to understand. You have 85 guys out there on both teams. So you have 170 guys somewhere in their 20s or 30s. You have a lot of testosterone on the field, okay? It's a competitive environment. It's extremely emotional, and people have their jobs on the line. So it's not like I can understand some people being like, oh, well, why is this happening? Well, I mean, there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of testosterone. There's a lot of things that, like, people have their careers on the line. So you're going to have some extracurricular activities. At the same time, if you're Matt Rule's staff, if you're Belichick's staff, every coaching staff is telling their players before they go out, no fighting. Like there was no discipline. It seems like, based on reports, there was a little extra business from the Panthers that seemed to be the instigators in a lot of this. Unfortunately, the Patriots were complicit. I don't totally blame them, but I'm not saying the Patriots were totally off the hook, but it does seem like the Panthers were kind of starting a lot of this. And when that happens, it just leads to, in my opinion, some unproductiveness. And like I said, I mean, we don't need to go any further than Mike Reitz being like, hey, this is not what we're looking for, so it's a little frustrating because, these can be valuable, and it seems like it was largely a waste of time.
I agree with that, Derek. The only thing that I can say to go along with that, and I think in a very strange way that Belichick will use this and will weed out players that maybe we're a part of this. Maybe we're going to see some of that. Maybe we're going to see some surprise cuts.
Kendrick Bourne. I mean,
well, again,
we did see him at the game. I mean, he got sat out of this last game because of the fight. I mean, that's it's flat out.
And that's a message, Derek. And that, in a way, I want that message sent because what happened was not, again, acceptable. So for me, you send the message. If they don't get the message, they're gone. It doesn't matter, really, honestly, on this team, except for the quarterback. It doesn't matter who you are. You're going to be gone. And, that to me is a strong message. I think Belichick will get something positive out of this.
You can't fight in the game. You can't fight in practice. If you fight, you get sent to the locker room. And again, I don't know this for a fact, but it seemed like Bourne was sad because of because he got sent out of practice. And I know that Fred Kirsch echoed the same thoughts on Patriots.com, which makes me feel
right.
Kind of like
and our friend Chris Goodwin chimes in, Bill will not stand for any bad discipline. He is 100% right on that. And I couldn't agree. And again, in a way, like I said, not that I want them to fight, but this will also eliminate players that maybe should not be there because that lack of discipline is not going to fly because it will affect the season, Derek. It will.
Well, we've been there, morale. And again, like, I'm not trying to be like, I don't know, hardo over here, but like a couple of fights happen. But like what?
No, but this is beyond that.
I mean, it's so beyond that. I mean,
way beyond what
if you listen to any of the Boston radio sports programs, I mean, that we're all down there. I mean, you couldn't go 10 minutes without them talking about a different fight that was on the field, a different skirmish, a different, it was just, it just seemed very, very like, Oh,
but they actually enjoyed that. But let's just
it depends.
That's a whole separate show.
I think when you're talking about doing something live, sure, but if you're looking at it as someone who's following the team and cares about the team, then you're looking at it as like, okay, well, I think we all understand it, but it's like, okay, at some point it's like, guys, get your shit together. I mean, come on.
Right. But the second day, like on day one,
second day especially,
there was the fight with Bourne.
I mean, that's the thing that gets me. That there is a second day, Steve. Go ahead, sorry.
Right. They had the fight. Bourne had a fight the first day.
Mm-hmm.
And Wilkerson and Kenny Robinson, the safety for Carolina, had a fight the first day. Then the second day, there was supposed to be a drill with kickoffs where it wasn't supposed to be full contact. And then Robinson lays out Wilkerson and stands over and taunts them, which really ticked off the Panthers coach Rule. And, he's saying they're going to watch the tape this weekend and they're going to decide whether or not Robinson has to go. And that's what started the fight on the second day. And then Dietrich Wise.
Robinson was kicked out of both days of joint practice, by the way.
And then Dietrich Wise on the very next play runs Christian McCaffrey way out of bounds. And that's where it spilled over where the woman got hurt. And that to me was uncalled for. You know, I understand you play to the whistle, but don't run, especially one of the marquee players in the league, way out of bounds, especially a guy with his injury history.
There's no reason for that, Steve. That's taking it too
there was
far.
no absolutely
Wise,
no reason.
Wise gave a little extra, oomph into what he was. He knew what he was doing, So it's you're not supposed to take guys to the ground, and everybody knows that you're supposed to. I don't want to say favor one of the better players in the league, but it's not what you're supposed to do. It's not. No. So I couldn't agree with Steve more. And I mean, hey, I don't think you going back to Steve's first example of Kenny Robinson over Wilkerson. I don't think we need to go any further than Matthew Slater's comments post practice. I mean, how many times have we heard Slater going back and forth or saying something? Slater was pissed, and I thought Slater's comments were perfectly articulated, and he literally walked over to the Panthers sideline with his hands up, like he was like, "Hey guys, I'm not here to rustle any feathers," but it's like he was like, "What are we doing here?" I mean, and I think that's something that probably needed to happen, and you know what, like I think I don't know a lot about Coach Rule, I really don't. Obviously, he's on the hot seat to get fired. He is actually the favorite to be fired first if you go to some of the sports books. But it certainly seems like whatever environment that he has going there was a lot of pent-up emotion coming from that sideline. I think that fueled a lot of things. I don't think the Patriots responded well to it, but going back to how we started the show, I do think the Patriots were complicit with some of this, and it's frustrating because
disappointing.
I do think competition is good, but this was an iron sharpening iron, So
not this, Derek. This is taking it to a place where it doesn't need to go. Like I said, some of the fighting or some of the drawing back and forth that we would see, that the three of us would see.
Sure,
you chalk it up to good competition. You say, okay, fine, that's going to happen. This goes way beyond that. It's not acceptable. And as our friend Chris Goodwin said, Bill will not stand for this, and you will not be around long if you continue to do that. And I don't know if Kendrick Bourne is one of those on the hot seat because of it, but if he is, then he has deserved it. And if he's not with the Patriots because of this, again, he would have deserved that. I don't want him not on the Pats, but you can't be doing this kind of stuff. You just can't.
But see, here's the thing, too, is like when you're at joint practices, like say Steve's the head coach, I'm the head coach. I'm going to tell Steve, like, hey, I really want to work on goal line.
Of course.
Today. What do you want to work on? And Steve will be like, I really want to work on third and longs.
Right.
So we do this. And, and Steve will tell me, hey, when you're on defense in third and longs, can you run a lot of zone? I need to get my guys ready for zone coverage,
right?
Or whatever.
Of course.
Okay.
It works back and forth.
Of course. So they're taking turns, seeing looks, getting their guys prepared for things that they want to see. When you have something like this going on, it's totally disruptive, and I just think that I think someone said, one of you two earlier said that the week was marred by this, and I agree. I just think it's frustrating that you have an opportunity to get better, and I don't think you did. And I think it goes back to just Carolina not being a disciplined team, and unfortunately, it seems like the Patriots kind of bought into it. So,
well, that's the bad Matt part. Rule's his comments after Wednesday, I thought would have put an end to it. Because I figured he would rein in his team because
Tuesday going into Wednesday, right?
Right, but then he said, with the hit from Kenny Robinson, he said he didn't see it, but I did see him standing over the player. That's not how we want to practice. We don't stand over someone and taunt them. That can affect their livelihood, so we send them off. We should be playing football the real way, where you help a guy up, not standing over him. And I figured that would have reined in his team. But if you noticed on Friday night, they were flagged for a 15-year penalty after the pick six, where players who weren't even dressed ran onto the field. And I think that was a little bit of taunting at the Patriots again. And, I take that as the coaches aren't being in control of their players.
No.
Yeah, he has no control over the locker room.
No, he has
I would
none.
say the same thing. I would say the same thing about I won't say the same thing about Bill, because I think Bill has his team under control for the most part. But this week was like, okay, he might have him under control, but they can only take so much. Because, like I said, you can't look at what happened this week and be like, it's only one-sided. I mean, it's not just one-sided. I mean, the
takes
Wise
two to
hit,
tango, Derek.
the Ferenc penalty in the preseason game, going after Kenny Robinson. By the way, I mean, come on, that was not an accident. Like, I mean, there were things going on throughout the week that were both sided.
And guys, I hate to go there because of the Patriots situation the last couple of years, but losing teams do this. Bad teams do this.
Yep.
Undisciplined teams do this. This is not what the Patriots should be striving for. So that's really the disappointing part for me is, and probably for someone like Mike Reese, because Mike Reese expects better from the New England Patriots. We all do. It's unacceptable. It's certainly unacceptable for Belichick. And the players should
clarify.
Again, really just embarrassed by the way they acted.
I want to clarify. I do think that Bill has control of this team, but I think that this week was eye-opening from a perspective of, I know Rule doesn't have control. Like Steve just laid out a good example. Okay, I know Rule doesn't have control of his team. It was pretty evident there. I do think the Panthers were instigating. I thought that the Patriots let themselves go way too far. And you heard that from comments from veteran players throughout the week, and it was pretty obvious. So, I mean, I know that Rule said what he said publicly, Russ, to your point from what you just mentioned, but did he say it to his players? Did his players really buy it? Or was he just saying that because it was a bad look? Because, I tend to feel like it was the latter. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
good
and
stuff.
some of the other beat writers, I'm trying to remember who said it, but they said on Tuesday that the Panthers had been talking smack from the minute they had got on the field, and the Patriot players fell into that where they were getting ticked.
So from what I gathered, the Patriots kind of went into it, I guess, at a lower tempo, and the Panthers came in at kind of a higher tempo. And, when you have a guy one-on-one from different teams, because the Patriots have been going against the same players for the last couple of weeks, like all the NFL teams do, right? That haven't been in joint practices. All of a sudden, you got a new mix of competition. Now you're being looked at in a different light. Those one-on-one reps, you're under a microscope.
Right.
So if Steve and I are going against each other, I'm the DB, Steve's the receiver. It seemed like the Panthers were doing a couple extra shoulder nudges, a little extra hand fighting, a little talking after each play. And I think that was why I keep saying the word instigate.
Yep.
I just feel like the Panthers were kind of instigating, inciting some reaction. They got what they wanted. And again, the Patriots were complicit in that. I just feel like, based on what I've gathered, the Panthers were kind of the ones who started the fire. So
okay. I think we've spent more than enough time on this, guys. Before we move on, I just want to share some comments from our friends in the UK. They're the ones that are commenting. So again, this is from our friend Chris Goodwin, who also noticed a little Goldman to begin the show.
What's
of course,
up,
Chris. And Chris was actually watching my last show, Cottage Talk, when I was talking to my friend Giannis, who happens to be a Bills fan, and Chris had to chime in and he made some comments. So thank you for that, Chris. I appreciate that. You put Giannis in his place. I appreciate that. So I just want to mention that. And of course, our friend Claire Cooper is with us too, and she hopes Derek feels better.
I'm feeling good. I appreciate it, Claire. I really do. Hope you're doing well.
Good stuff, guys. Before we get into talking about the game, we do have some things that went on during the week. Let's start here. Let's start with, I don't know how you feel about this. We haven't talked about this. Let's talk about the retirement of James White.
Yeah.
So, Steve, thoughts on James White retiring? It's not a surprise, but I want to look at it this way. What's his legacy?
Oh, I think his legacy will be a great one for the Patriots. I mean, I think in 5 years he's going to put on a red jacket with the team Hall of Fame. We weren't, as you said, we weren't surprised by this because that injury is really tough to come back from. Most players who suffer that, either their career is over or they're never quite the same. And, just before training camp, Mike Reese was saying he saw him at a charity event and he was still walking with an uncomfortable gait, which tells you he was limping. And so
that was in April.
That kind of put the handwriting on the wall. But
right.
Yeah, it doesn't take away from his great career.
Nope.
I look back, there were so many games you could, specifically point to and say, they didn't have anything going on offense. And then Brady started finding James White and opened things up, and they came away with the win. Yeah. I mean, you go back to that Super Bowl 51, and there was a playoff game against the Ravens. He was just on another plane during that game. He honestly, the Super Bowl against Atlanta, I thought he had a real shot at being, and he probably should have been the MVP.
Of course. I agree with that. And what's interesting about him, Steve, and then I'll go to Derek and get his thoughts, is that I remember his first year. He barely played. So you went from a player that barely played to becoming probably a player that will get possibly a red jacket. In fact, he probably will get a red jacket.
Not possibly.
Probably.
Yeah, he will.
He will. Okay, fine, Derek. Thank you. So we've gone full circle on James White, but that also shows that even as a rookie, if you don't show anything as a rookie, you can still have a Patriots Hall of Fame career. Julian Edelman is a similar player. But James White really epitomized that. So, Derek, what are your thoughts about the retirement of James White?
Well, Steve, I know you weren't here last show, but Steve and I did talk about James White a little bit. So I would say about this for James White, he was reliable, consistent, and clutch. Never fumbled in his entire career. Always was where he needed to be. Everybody talks about him the same way. The people that know him, he's always got a smile on his face, always professional. I think if you go to the Falcons Super Bowl, you look at 16 targets, 14 catches, over 100 yards, 3 touchdowns, a 2-point conversion. I mean, that's sick. I mean, it's just sick. I just feel like he's one of those players that you look at him and you go, it's not like overly flashy with his, with his moves, on the field. It's not like he has like this 4.2 speed.
Right.
He doesn't have like the twitchiness of like a Tyreek Hill or one of those kind of players. But he's when he's moving on the field, you're like, this guy looks like he's so patient. He's so under control. It almost felt like James White played like he was seeing everybody else in slow motion, and he just kind of moved. Yeah, just unbelievable vision. I just feel like, again, always where he needed to be, always under control, always reliable. Just one of those guys that you just can't replicate. Hard to describe. You just kind of see it, and you're just like, wow. Just a great player, great person. Happy for him. Sad for the team because that's a big hole to fill. But I think that what he brought to the team. I mean, you don't win. It's funny. He's sitting out his rookie year, watching Shane Vereen set the record for catches caught against Seattle, only for him to break it
2 years later,
a couple years later against the Falcons, and one of the best performances we've seen from a player. I mean, what more can you say? Just a tremendous career.
I totally agree, Derek. All right, so let's move on to something that happened this week. And I don't know if this is a surprise, but I was actually hoping that we would see him play for the Patriots. But again, we're not going to see it. And there's a lot of history here too, Steve. Thoughts on Malcolm Butler being put on IR? Now, I would like to talk about Malcolm Butler as a player and try to steer away from the conspiracy theories. And Derek's probably going to say, let's talk about the conspiracy theories.
No, I'm not.
Nah.
Okay, because I think the conspiracy theories are BS. I don't care about any of that. I care about.
I really don't care either, but like I really
Yeah.
have no interest in it.
Well,
I'm gonna be
good.
honest.
Well, I'm glad because I really don't want to go there. But I just want to get Steve's thoughts, and then I'll go to you, Derek, on the situation with Malcolm Butler. Do you think that he really is legitimately hurt? Now, to be truthful, the Patriots have put players on IR that weren't hurt before. It's actually happened. I don't know. So what are your thoughts about Malcolm Butler?
Well, that's a conspiracy theory right there.
In a way, I guess. So look who's the hypocrite, right?
But I was looking forward to seeing if he could recapture some of his, playing skill from. I didn't want to go all the way back to the Super Bowl against Seattle, but I wanted to go back to 2020. I thought if he could play at that level,
yeah,
that he played at 2 years ago, he'd be fine and he'd be part of the rotation for sure. But he had kind of an uneven training camp. In the short to intermediate range, he's still very sticky in coverage. But I think he's lost a little bit of a step, with that long speed. And I thought that was coming home to roost, as training camp went on. But the other thing is that, we know Bill likes his veteran players. And I thought we're still going to find him a spot on the roster. I really thought that because, he does have his history here. He's been an outstanding player. He knows the defense. I was looking forward to seeing how they were going to try to use him. But now, unfortunately, I do believe he was hurt. I don't think this was a conspiracy to whatever.
Derek's shaking his head.
Off.
He doesn't agree with you. I can tell. He's got that grin on his face. Okay. Derek, do you disagree with Steve? Do you think that there's something to this? I'm just talking about that he wasn't injured. And what is the impact of Malcolm Butler's Patriots career? And again, it's an interesting one.
I think Bill told you what he felt about his outside receivers when he started working John Jones on the outside. I mean, maybe it was just maybe he's looking at other options. I think that when Steve and I talked about this last week, he's got Jonathan Jones working outside. I think he felt better about moving somebody. Jonathan Jones has basically been a slot corner his entire career. So
right.
I think Bill looked at it and said, I feel better about what's behind Jonathan Jones in the slot than I do about what's going on outside right now. I thought it was an indictment on Butler. I thought it was an indictment on Terrence Mitchell as well. In fact, the morning that Butler was placed on IR, I had tweeted out, both of those guys weren't making the team. It was one or the other. Okay. It seems obvious. It seemed obvious to me. It was going to be Mills, Jones, and then the two rookies, both Jones. We got too many Jones on the team. So you got four guys right there. So it wasn't going to be Terrence Mitchell and Malcolm Butler. I have no idea if what was legit or not. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is, I thought that Butler and Mitchell playing as much as they did in the first game, I thought was kind of eyebrow raising. Okay. But to me, it was a long shot for him to make the roster. It would have been nice if it worked out. It didn't. So I don't necessarily disagree with Steve. I just kind of look at it, a little differently. Okay. But I'm not even sure Terrence Mitchell makes his team. So he probably will. Okay. He probably will. But man, you go over some of the different permutations of different guys they're going to keep, and I think Miles Bryant's going to be on the team, and I already listed the other four. So are they going to keep 6, 7? They're going to have a lot of safeties because they're going to use a lot of safeties.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about 12 plus defensive backs. I mean, that's a lot. So certainly, and it's going to be really fascinating to see the breakdown of this roster when it's all said and done, because it's kind of taking shape in front of us, and I think it's a little different than what we've seen in the past few years.
I agree with that, Derek. And that's going to lead me, before we talk about the game itself and some of the things that come out of the game, I am going to talk about one thing that has come out of the game. That's the news about the injury to Tyquan Thornton. Okay?
Can you pause that real quick? So Chris in the comments asked, "Is Butler done for the year? If so, why keep a player on IR based upon his age? If a player's put on an injury reserve at this point of the year, he's done for the year. So yeah, he can't. He's done. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
No worries, Derek. I'm going right back to you. So let's talk about the unfortunate injury to Tyquan Thornton. And this is a player that, again, they've had really bad luck drafting wide receivers. What I've seen so far has been positive. So this is a little bit of a blow. I don't know how long he's going to be out. But what are your thoughts about Tyquan Thornton? And does this hurt the rotation with the wide receivers? Is this going to keep someone else on the roster? What are your thoughts about his impact of being out?
So reportedly, he's going to be out close to 8 weeks. So if you look at the calendar, you're talking about probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 games he's going to miss. I mean, again, just kind of a guess. For me, it is unfortunate. Again, Steve and I talked about Thornton kind of on the rise last week, Russ. And I mean, even the beat writers that people would claim to be on the negative slide have been, I would guess, fanning the flames of Thornton, and I think it's exciting. It is exciting. We saw a little bit in the first game. Unfortunately, he did something that kind of reminded me. I don't know if you guys saw this. When the last play he played was the one where he got crushed by like 4 guys. And it kind of reminded me of Brandon Cooks in the Super Bowl when he got hurt against the Eagles, where he kind of like circled back and the defender just like kind of creamed him. So the thing about this injury was a little confusing because I felt when they ruled him out, I actually was really confused because he hadn't been playing. I thought he was pulled out of the game because he was just done. I didn't even realize he was hurt. I thought he was just, done for the night. Like he was like, that was it. When they ruled him out, I was confused and then concerned. If a player gets hurt in a game, a regular season game, like say whoever it is, and the team immediately rules him out, it's always a bad sign. Always, 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 1,000% true. If in this circumstance, he had been sidelined for a while. I thought he was just done, like done in terms of practicing, or playing. It was a very weird kind of like how it happened. It wasn't that noticeable. I mean, looking back on it, okay, you had 4 guys kind of lay on you. Yeah, collarbone issue. It's unfortunate, Russ, because he had been positively building momentum and doing everything the right way. He adds a different threat to this offense. And when him and Nelson Aguilar are on the sides of, both on the outsides of the offense, it stresses the defense in a different way than what they've done in the past. And I'm excited to see what he can do the rest of the year. I'm happy it's probably not going to sideline him the whole year because I really would like to see him on the field because injuries, especially to rookies, really hurts their development. So I'm hoping that's not the case here.
Okay. Steve, over to you. I want to get your thoughts on this. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. Didn't Deion Branch get hurt his rookie season? I could be wrong about that, or didn't play as much, and didn't see as much as we thought. Again, I'm going way back, but the injury to Thornton, I think, changes a little bit of maybe what the Patriots are planning to do with their roster. So, what are your thoughts on that?
It definitely does. I mean, we were thinking that, and Phil Perry has reported, through his sources that the Patriots have been getting multiple inquiries about their wide receivers. And I think that's going to slow that down quite a bit because now with him being out at least 2 months, I don't think they're going to move anybody.
Steve, can I ask you a question? Mm-hmm. If say put the Thornton stuff to the side, is there a player that you would move? Because you and I specifically had talked about moving Aguilar in the past, but he's been their best player. If you ask all the beat writers, the majority would say he's been their best player. So
I wouldn't move Aguilar now.
Would you move Myers?
If anyone would be moved, I think he'd maybe be the choice. But then again, Kendrick Bourne hasn't played in either preseason game.
Man,
No.
he's been talk about a guy with a bad summer. And I thought Evan Lazar laid this out on Patriots.com really well the other day. Since he talked to Mike Reese earlier in the summer about
Yep.
the offense changing, I mean, it hasn't been off the field, it's been on the field where he hasn't really been involved, or he's had a bad practice, he got kicked out for fighting, or he hasn't really caught the ball well, or just like little things where it's like we talked about Kendrick Bourne taking a bigger stance in the offense. This summer has been totally the opposite of what we expected.
But Derek, that shouldn't surprise you with Belichick.
Why?
And because players that do what he did, and I'm not saying that it's wrong talking to Mike Reese of all people, but sharing information like that does not go over well with the coaches. It just doesn't.
But I thought Evan. I thought it was interesting because when you look at it could be just coincidental, but looking at the series of events since that point, I thought it was a good note by Evan to be like, it's been kind of weird since this. Like at the time, we were kind of looking at it as like, okay, that's just others, KB. Just he just seems like a jovial person. He's kind of just like out there having fun, hanging out. Kendrick Bourne looks like he lives his life like he's never had a bad day, and it's fine. Like that's his personality. And I don't know. It just seems weird. The Kendrick Bourne thing just seems weird. Like last year, he signed and he has a bigger year than many of us expected. And you see like the locker room highlights, and him and Bill are dapping it up, and he's making Belichick laugh and all these things. And then this whole offseason has been weird. And it's I can't remember being more confused by a player than I have been about Kendrick Bourne, about what's happening right now. Is it one of those things like Jimmy Garoppolo, who was always terrible in practice but always performed well in the games? Is Kendrick Bourne just like not a practice player where it's like
I don't know,
not clicking for him? Like I need the regular season to start so I can see what Kendrick what Kendrick Bourne's status is, because I have not been more confused about a Patriots player in years.
Garoppolo might be an interesting situation because maybe it is. We just don't know, because there are players, Derek. Listen, we've seen it down there, all three of us, that have not been good practice players. Garoppolo is probably the worst.
Yeah, and by the way, Russ,
and then all of a sudden has an impact. You know,
by the way, Chris has an answer for your Deion Branch.
I know. I'm going to share it right now. So this is from our friend Chris. In his rookie season in 2002, Branch started 7 of 13 games played for the Patriots, missing the final 3 games of the regular season with a leg injury. So it was the end of that season. Thank you,
I love how
Chris.
Chris is like kind of like low-key producing this and just
our
answers.
Oh yeah, he's taken over my job. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Well, when you bring up an example from 20 years ago, then none of the three of us remember. This is what we need. We need Chris.
No, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you doing that. Okay, guys, coming up now, we are going to discuss the preseason game for the Patriots against the Panthers, and what is the fallout of that? Do we feel more confident about the team or less confident about the team? Okay, guys, let's not waste any more time. Let's get to it. So, Derek, I'll give you first shot at this. Just opening thoughts on the preseason game against the Panthers. What stands out?
Well, I think what stands out to this point of, I guess, training camp and through to preseason games is we have been talking all summer about how we felt better about the offense and the defense. And I'll go back to the same kind of comment I had on Kendrick Bourne. I'm confused because the defense...
I think the defense looks pretty good, Derek.
The defense looks pretty freaking good, Russ. And I don't know if I'm getting hoodwinked like I did back in 2011, 2013, when Andre Carter and Gerard Mayo were blitzing the crap out of everybody, and the defense looked like it was going to take on a whole new life. And then
it never happened, by the way.
Yeah, and they kind of reverted back to what it was. I don't know if that's the case or the offense. The offense is scaring the shit out of me. Okay, I'm
there with you, Derek. I'm there with you.
And I know my concerns were only confirmed last night when Russ said that he was worried about Mac Jones. I thought I was being I honest to God thought I was being overreactionary, Derek, until I saw Russ's tweet saying that he was worried about Mac, and I go, holy crap. Russ is worried about Mac Jones, and so am I. I felt so vindicated, Russ. That tweet, I'm going to print it out and hang it on my wall.
Derek, here we go. I'm sharing it right now on the screen. So this is what I tweeted out. So I watched the Patriots preseason game, and I know it's just a preseason game, but I'm starting to have my doubts on Mac Jones.
Wow.
I was at training camp a few weeks ago and saw similar issues with holding the ball and bad throws. I'm also not sold on his throwing motion. Yes, I tweeted that out, Derek. And to be honest with you, my son was the one that said, I need to tweet this out because I said this to him while we're watching the game. He was flabbergasted that I went there. And he's like, well, listen, you can't just say it to me. You have to share this on Twitter and you have to share it on the show.
Way to go, Brady.
So this is all Brady's fault.
No, it's not Brady's fault. It's Brady is the source of pushing you to say what the truth is. Okay. And the truth is that if you have eyeballs, you should be concerned about what's gone on the last few weeks. So here's the thing. Armageddon aside.
Steve's holding his head, by the way.
Armageddon aside, I really do feel like we could all be talking about the Patriots offense being fine 5-6 weeks into the season. I do think it's going to be a clunky start. We don't know exactly what they've changed, what they're installing, etc. I am a little frustrated by some of the things that I've heard and been kind of shared. So what I'll boil it down to is this. I'm a little frustrated that we've all heard that the offense has not been clicking well in training camp. But what some of the consistently shared things has been is that Mac has been either, I'll say, off and, throwing balls into the turf and kind of putting his hands up in the air. And,
Doing this, Derek.
Yeah, exactly. Okay? And he's obviously a little frustrated. I think based on what we've, heard reported is that the offense hasn't been moving well.
No.
The offense looked like it was sleepwalking in this game. I know it's just preseason, but
yep.
I mean, come on, look at the best quarterbacks in the league. We saw it with Brady. It should be just kind of like you're just doing a walkthrough. I mean, you're talking about bing, 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 move the ball a little bit. He was the pass to Parker right out of the gate. Behind him, he had a throw late. High. He had one good pass out of 8 in this preseason game. Half of them hit the ground. I mean, it just seems like it's just not fluid at all. I mean, just not at all. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's the coaching, the new offense, whatever it is. I am just worried about the offense. I just think that it's going to take some more time to kind of put together. I had less worries about the offense than the defense until the last few weeks, and now I'm starting to wonder if I misjudged
Steve, Derek's world is being turned upside down. There's no question about that. But I want to go to you, and I want to focus on the Patriots offense, okay? You can certainly comment on my thoughts on Mac Jones, but this is what I want to talk to you about, because this is one thing that I truly believe. I think that they are changing the offense to focus on his strengths. I think that's why we're seeing them go to, as you said to me, this is more of a McVay offense than a Shanahan offense. So, but they are definitely doing this, and they are struggling. Now, let's be honest here. Your starting tackles were out. So that's a factor in everything that we saw. But I got to tell you, it shook me up watching him, and it shook me up watching Mac Jones at training camp a couple weeks ago, because I saw things that I'm like, I'm not sure about this. And I saw it last season too. So I know I'm doing a little Russ overreacting with my take here, and good for Brady for calling me out and making me share it during the show. So that's why I'm doing that. But I want to focus on the struggles offensively. And what are your thoughts on this? Is it more of it just needs time? Because I truly believe that they are trying to maximize the strengths of Mac Jones. That is the reason I think is behind all of this.
Yes, and before I get into that, it's like it's so rare to see you two in total agreement on something. I felt like I was in a horror film. So
it makes me question myself. The fact that we're agreeing, I'm literally concerned about it.
To see you two agree on something, I kept looking behind me. It was like, Is there a camera behind me? It's like, yeah, you're on candid camera. Or something.
Ashton
I know.
Kutcher's behind
Derek
you
and I
getting punked.
rarely agree. Anyone that's listened to the show
but-
all these years.
Makes me feel like my
I
take is
think the
terrible.
offense. I think it's everyone right now because
Okay.
we're looking at the offensive line missing blocks. Their timing isn't down. I think that carries over to the backs and the receivers, and I don't think they have their timing down yet with this new offense.
Okay.
You can see it in the plays, and like Derek said, right off the bat, the first pass to Parker was behind him, and then they struggled 3 and outs the first 2 series.
Didn't have a first down until their 9th play.
Yep. And then it seemed like, okay, they were getting into a little bit of a rhythm. He threw a perfect dime to Nelson Aguilar down the left sideline. And I think that made the players relax a little bit. And then they went down and scored a touchdown.
Right.
I think it's just going to take time, but I don't think it's a Mac Jones issue. I think
Okay.
it's all
So you
of
think
them.
this is
I
more of a
think
an
it's all.
offense issue.
I think it's all of it, but Mac's part of it, Steve. I mean, it's not.
I'm not saying he isn't. I'm saying all of them are involved with this. I think it's a question of timing. It's a question of chemistry. They need to, iron these issues out. They have a couple of practices this week against the Raiders, who are a good team. So I look forward to seeing much better results this week.
Okay. Yeah, and 2 or 3 weeks ago, when all the beat reporters were basically saying the sky is falling and the offense was a mess, I go back to what Steve.
But I was there for that, Derek. That was legit.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it wasn't, but I'm saying I think a lot of it does go back to that the offensive line doing a new blocking scheme. I think that if that is not. If they want to implement that, I have no problem with it. But people have to understand that if it all starts up front. So a lot of these issues, I do think the offensive line goes back to it. Yeah. And I think that Mac Jones was frustrated because of some of the other changes they made based on body language alone.
Yep.
And that was widely reported. It's not just one person. We're talking about multiple beat writers. Okay. It's not like we know they're not just making things up. It's just what they're seeing. And I do think that right now it's there are some hand in hand things, but it is a widespread issue. And that's why to me, I don't know if it's the case, and we'll see during the regular season. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they come out and it's just kind of whatever it is.
Right.
I do feel like it could be a little sloppy, and I don't know if Mac, I don't know what it is, but it looked like on this last preseason game, it looked like he kind of was like, oh crap, like we're actually doing this now. This isn't practice. Like he almost looked like he wasn't like ready for it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't know. That's why I think it could take a couple of weeks before the offense kind of gets moving. I just think that they need a little bit more kind of push. And I'm not really sure what that is, but it just doesn't look natural. It looks like they're kind of struggling through things, and that's why I don't know if it's terminology or something. It's something behind the scenes that we're not able to see because it just seems more difficult than it should be.
Okay. Well, that's going to lead us now to talk about some of the good things to come out of the game. That has to be the defense. Steve, I'm going to go to you. You and I have already talked about this. And what's interesting about this, and Derek, that's what's blowing Derek's mind, is that he's feeling more confident in the defense. So am I. Because what I've noticed, and I definitely get your thoughts on it, is especially at the linebacker level, we're seeing speed. And that's just not something that we're generally used to seeing. You're also seeing it on the line, but you're seeing speed all over the place. This is where they needed to concentrate on to change over that defense. Whether it's big names, forget about the fact that the name of the player. They have brought in players that have speed and are flying to the ball. I've been waiting to see this for years. Now, as Derek said, could it be like that preseason game with Gerard Mayo? I certainly hope not, but I don't think you can fake speed. And what I noticed in this game is speed everywhere on the defense.
It's funny because we've been harping for them to get faster and more athletic on defense for I don't know how many years. And and when they did that this year, a lot of the fan base was like really upset with this. And I've seen more than one comment on social media where the Patriots have the worst linebacking unit in the NFL. And I don't think that's the case.
Not based on what I've watched.
And, they do have that speed element now. I think that the trade, and you and I talked about this, the trade for Mac Wilson,
I think it's going to be huge.
I think it's going to be a big positive for this team because, yeah, he's a little bit smaller, than what we're used to seeing. But, when you look at him on the field, he goes sideline to sideline. And when he hits people, he hits people.
Boy, do they need that, Stephen. That was the thing that stood out to me.
And I've liked what I've seen from several of the newer faces, Raekwon McMillan. I look at third year guy, Anthony Jennings. I think Anthony Jennings is a starter. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm watching him play. He's
well, we've been waiting for this for 3 years. We've been waiting for this.
I mean, he's almost on to Hightower size. He's 6'3", 259. So he's right at that edge of where, Hightower was. And I mean, I like what I've seen with him setting the edge in the running game. And he's shown a real good push to get after the passer. I think he's going to be your early down, edge player opposite Matthew Judon. And, we're going to see Josh Uche come in. He's having another really good training camp this year. So we'll see if he can continue that in on passing downs. But I like what I've seen with the defense. I like what I've seen with the linebackers. I like what I've seen with the young defensive linemen.
So do I
think
Steve.
Each one of those guys, you could make a case for making the team. And I think you could make a case for them not making the team.
But there's a lot of competition there, and that's what's good about it. And I'm glad that we are talking about Anthony Jennings because, listen, we were just talking about James White, and James White didn't show up until year 2. Well, Anthony Jennings is going into year 3, and this is make or break for him.
Yep.
So for the fact that he's really now, as you're saying, Steve, you think he's the starter and on first and second down, and Uche comes in on third down, that's not a bad thing. I'm not against that. But Derek, I want to go to you. I want to get your thoughts on the defense. We haven't even really talked about the secondary. So I want to more focus on the secondary with you. Because what's interesting about this is you look at it, they don't have a true number one corner. It looks like it's going to be Jalen Mills. Okay. And Jalen Mills, according to everyone down there, has performed like a number one corner. So again, I'm not saying that he is. He's going to possibly be the Patriots, but they're going to be playing a lot of zone, as Steve and I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So you have him. They've moved Jonathan Jones out, but their safeties are extremely strong. And to me, it seems like it's more important that they have basically defensive backs on the field rather than calling them cornerbacks and safeties. They're going to mix and match if they're going to play a lot of zone. So what are your thoughts on the secondary specifically?
Well, I'll say Anthony Jennings, before we get focused on the secondary, I just want to say that Anthony Jennings has surprised me a ton to the point where Steve and I think you weren't on the show, Russ, but Steve and I had a disagreement, a rare one between us.
Really?
Where Steve was kind of pumping Anthony Jennings' tires, and I thought he was cut. I thought he was over. I had already cleaned my hands of him. I have not felt so wrong about a player evaluation in a long time. So I'll give Steve credit for that. I'll say that off the top. Secondary, to me, still a big question mark. I still think Marcus Jones and Jack Jones are projects, but they have shown some early returns, which is great to see. I think that Jalen Mills, Russ, to your point, I think that he's performed well. Again, 2 players that, including myself, the fan base wasn't super high on as free agent signings. Now you have Jalen Mills and Nelson Aguilar both having strong camps in year 2.
I was going to say, Derek, and that's year 2. And this is what tends to happen in year 2.
I agree. And there are a lot of people who blow that off. And I think that it doesn't happen all the time, but
No.
it's common for players in their second year with the team to feel a little bit more comfortable in what they're doing. I think Jalen Mills is playing with a lot of confidence, which I feel like is one of the more underrated defensive back traits. We've talked about this on the show before. He's playing with confidence. He's playing well. Now, I personally would prefer they play man coverage. I've seen zone. Zone, I think, is hard to work. It's hard to work. I think it's going to be a lot of bend. Put it this way. I think the defense is going to be a lot of bend, don't break this year. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
People are going to be moving the ball. I think the Bill would prefer to play zone. He's playing, or I'm sorry, he prefer to play man. He's playing zone because he feels like he doesn't have the bodies. We've seen that over the last 20 years. Obviously, they'll mix their coverages up, but he will play man coverage if he has the guys. I think that he doesn't feel like they have the guys right now. He didn't last year when they kind of changed the defense over. So we'll see. But I'm intrigued with some of the guys they have in the secondary. I'm intrigued by the safeties. But we'll kind of see how it goes throughout the year.
But Derek, to your point about playing a lot of zone, the Patriots are going to face a lot of running quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're scared to death of playing zone. Playing man with running quarterbacks. So that might be playing into this as well.
Sure. I mean, Josh Allen ate them alive last year.
Exactly.
He ate them alive.
Right. And you're going to have to figure that puzzle out, to be honest with you. They're going to have to figure that puzzle out. Guys, listen, the hour pretty much has flown by. It really has flown by. And I know and I appreciate you guys doing this and working around my schedules. So thank you, both of you. So let's end here before we wrap up the show. And let's talk about the name of the show. And I'll ask you both a question. Steve, I'll give you first crack at this. Are the Patriots heading in the right or wrong direction?
I think they're heading in the right direction. I think they're going to be just fine this year. Okay. I know you're not quite convinced of that, but I have no worries about Bill, the coach. None.
Neither do I. I don't either.
And I think they're going to get it all figured out. The one guy we didn't mention, though, that I think has made a great case for making the team is a guy I thought had zero chance, and that's little Jordan Humphrey.
Oh, yeah.
He showed up in both games, and then he made that special teams play that Matthew Slater said he looked at Justin Bethel and said he didn't know if either one of them could have made that.
That's great.
Oh,
that's pretty high praise for a guy that's trying to make the team.
Right.
Hey, and I tweeted this out, and I know it was pretty popular on Twitter the other day. But to your point, Steve, when you look at we've talked about Trey Nixon building, kind of stacking days together over summer, but he's had a lot of drops these last couple games. And when you're talking about a Trey Nixon drop on a third down, which on the literally following play, we see little Jordan Humphrey on fourth down on punt on the punt coverage team go down and kick the ball back and play like he just did. The coaches pay attention to those things. Those are the kind of things where when little Jordan's on the team and Trey Nixon's not, and we're wondering, what happened. It's those kind of things like that. That was a play that like Will Compton, a linebacker, and I think he's a free agent right now. But like Will Compton tweeted out this week. That's going to be on every single special teams film this entire week across the league. That's the kind of play that shows I'm doing whatever I can to make this team.
Okay.
And the one thing Bill said about him after the game is that he's a big wide receiver, a tight-ended player.
Oh, that gets Claire's ears percolating there. I'm sure Claire's like,
tight end-ish.
Tight end-ish. Tight end-ish. Do you hear that, Claire? That's for you, Claire. Okay. Derek, your thoughts. Are the Patriots heading in the right or wrong direction?
They're heading in the same direction I thought they would be, because I think they're basically a 500 team, which you two disagree with. So I think they're right where I thought they were going to be.
Okay. So
I'm ready. I feel vindicated as I ever have. So.
Okay. So Claire disagrees, and she says, nah, he's a wide receiver. So just a little.
Yeah, he's
little thoughts from.
That's because she wants Izzo back.
Oh, Can we, Steve? Shh, what are you doing? Shh. Don't
He's
say
a wide
that.
receiver. He's a wide receiver, but he's got a tight end diet. I'll just say that.
Okay. Please don't get her started on Ryan Izzo. We'll never get through the show. Okay. I love you, Claire.
Can I say one thing before we
here
wrap
we
up?
go. Okay, yeah.
Before we
Claire.
wrap up, I do want to say I am very intrigued with some of the late round draft picks and undrafted free agents the team has. I think there's a lot of them that could show up on the roster. The legitimate 53-man roster, I really am intrigued. I think that LeBron Ray, who Steve and I have talked about a lot.
I've heard you guys talk
from
about
Alabama, very versatile, has moved around the defensive line a lot. Sam Roberts, who we've talked about before, won the Cliff Harris Award, which is the Defensive Player of the Year for Division II. He was a 6th-round draft pick. He hasn't really shown up in practice based on reports. Both games, he stood out big time. Really intrigued with him. Brendan Schooler from Texas, special teams constantly showing up. I think that's something. And DeMarcus Mitchell. Again, I think back-to-back games. I think they have 4, maybe even 5 if you count Cody Russi at center, because I thought James Ferentz has had a really rough week. They have 4 or 5 undrafted or late-round draft picks that I think have a legit shot at making this team. So I wanted to highlight a couple of those names because as we're getting closer, we got another round of cuts in 2 days.
Yep.
So I just want to keep those names out there because I think those guys are going to be, if they're not making the team, I think they're going to be wanted to be on the practice squad. They are names that have really, really stood out in big ways.
Okay. Before I give my thoughts, I'm just going to share this because this is going back and forth and driving me crazy. So this is from Claire. Bring me the Izzo. So I'm going to just share this right now on the show. Claire, if the Patriots ever bring back Ryan Izzo, I will step aside and let you host Patriots 4th and 2. That's how strong I feel about this.
I've never wanted Ryan Izzo to be back so badly.
There we go.
Better show.
Fantastic. Thank you, Derek. What a great way to end the show. And I haven't even given my thoughts because Derek had to go there. Okay, so my thoughts are the Patriots are heading in the right direction, and it is about the defense. As Derek said, I do believe the offense will come around, and I think you will see them cater to what Mac Jones does well. Is he an elite quarterback? I think the jury is out on that. I'm not sure yet. So that's why I said what I did to my son. But I do think that they're headed in the right direction. And Derek, I'm not changing my prediction. I actually was asked by a website covering the NFL if I would give a prediction, and I stuck with 12-5. So I'm not changing my mind on that. So I'm going with 12-5. Anyways.
Hey, the captain of the Titanic went down with the ship. So if you want to do that same thing, you can too.
Okay, great. And I will just leave us with this. This is from our friend Chris, Patriots 4th and Izzo. I love that.
I never want to hear Ryan Izzo's name ever again. Just throwing it out there for future shows.
Okay, well, that's great. So let's end the show on that note because I've had enough of Ryan Izzo as well. For Derek Havens and Steve Ballsherry, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching Patriots 4th and Izzo or Patriots 4th and 2. I'm going to say Patriots 4th and 2.